So let's see what you are going to develop at the end of this lesson. So you'll be working with the source code, and you will be completing this login page which you started on a previous lesson. And basically what you will be learning is about input validation, such as if the user doesn't enter input, you will do the validation and you will let the user go back and enter uh, the data. If the data is missing, you will let's say if the password is missing, you will inform the password cannot be empty and say login back. And if the user enter let's say the username and the password and click login, and then you will be redirecting the user into a page, and then whatever the welcome logged in user, you will say hi ABC, or if admin logs in, you will say, let's say if admin logs in, you will dynamically say hi admin, or whoever the logged in user. So let's see how to do this now. Hi everyone, welcome to the lesson login validation part 1 using scriptlets. We'll be using these tools for this lecture. You need to make sure you have some basic knowledge in C Sharp, and you have to do the lessons prior to this lesson in order. You can find the link to those lessons in the description section. In this lesson, you will be learning about the input validations in the login page, then embedded code blocks, and about ASP built-in objects and request parameters and redirections and URL query parameters. Practical demonstrations as usual. Okay, so now let's move in. Let's start doing the practicals. So this is what we have developed up to the previous lesson, where you have a login page where you can input some username and password and login. Right. So we have done up to this stage, but now the problem is, let's wait till it's load. If I go back, if I put a empty username and password and click login, it allows me to get into the site. So I have to stop this. So that is what we are going to discuss in this lecture. So how to stop this, and this is what we call as input validations. So I have to apply input validations, and there are multiple ways of doing input validations. So this is part 1 of that. Then you can see another way of doing it in part 2, likewise in part 3. So make sure you look at the remaining parts to get the complete picture. So let's do this now. So one way of doing this validations, one way of looking at this is as client-side validations, because your login page is a HTML page and you got the HTML text boxes and passwords. So to do this validation, one mechanism is using JavaScript and doing a client-side validation. So that is the kind of standard and the basic approach. But now we are looking at another approach in this lecture, right? So that you know there are multiple approaches. So here we will be looking at using a server-side validation as another approach, where you write the validation inside a ASP page, and then we will be using embedded code blocks to do it as another mechanism. So in this example, it will be done as a server-side validation. So, but keep in mind the best way to do this is as using client-side validations using JavaScript. But why are we showing the server-side validation is, when you look at the remaining parts of this lecture, say part 2 and part 3, you will see ASP.NET provides validation controllers. And when you want to use the validation controllers, you will be doing it as a server-side validation, but the execution will happen at the client side. So it's another approach. You will see that. So just follow the steps, then you will see what I meant, right? So to start with, I need to create a new page. So I'm going to create a new page. I'm going to call it as ASP page. So I'm clicking web form, right? And I'm going to call this as login validation ASP page. So now it's a new ASP page, a login validation. So let's double click on it. So it creates a basic ASP page. So inside this, I'm going to apply my validations. So as informed, we are going to start with using embedded code blocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an embedded code block over here. So which means, let's say somewhere in this, maybe inside the body at the beginning, wherever you want, what you will do is you will put this special symbol like this. So when you put this, you call this as a embedded code block, right? Embedded code block. So inside this, you can write your C# coding. So the purpose of having an embedded code block is you can write your C# code. So what do I mean by you can write your C# code is when you look at an ASP page, you can see there are HTML codes. So you can just write HTML code without any embedded code block. But whenever you want to write C# coding, one mechanism is to use embedded code block. So the embedded code block, what I'm going to do now is this. I want to do the login validation, which means the client will enter the username and the password in these two text boxes. And then when the client click the login button, this data, username and the password, will be sent to the action, which means my action should now not be the welcome page, it should be the login validation page, because I want to do the validation soon after I click the submit button. So the data meaning the username and password has to be sent to the login validation page. So when you set the action to the login validation page and click the submit button, this data will be sent to the login validation ASP page. So this request response model, when you run this web application, it's going to run over the internet, and so when you run this, a client will connect to this app, and the client will type the username and the password. Client will connect to the website, type the username and the password, and click the submit button. Then the username and password will be submitted to the server. When I say to the server, it will be submitted to the login validation ASP page. So now the ASP page will be receiving the incoming data, right? It will be receiving the incoming data. So now the ASP page is receiving the incoming data. So it has to access the username and the password. So just to explain that, when you run this and a client will connect to it, and the login page will be running in the client computer over the internet, and when the client click the submit button, it sends a request to the server, and the request will be sent to the, if I show it to the login validation ASP page. And this login validation ASP page will be on the server, so that login validation ASP page will receive that request. So the username and the password typed by the client will be coming with the request. So because of that, inside the ASP page, you have to access the request, and from the request you have to ask for the username and the password. And same, if you are sending output, you have to send it through the response. So which means now you have to access the incoming HTTP request object. You have to access it from inside your login validation ASP page. So your login validation ASP page now should access the incoming request object. So let's see how to do it now. So this is the command or the line you'll be using for that. So this request is a built-in object. So what are built-in objects? So in ASP, you have ASP built-in objects. So you got lots of built-in objects which are readily available, such as request and response, etc. Server, session. We'll be using each of these in future. So there's a built-in object called request. So what your ASP page can do is you can use this request object, and then there are methods inside this, methods and properties. So what I'm using here is params. So inside requests, there is something called params. So you have to see what that params is inside the request object. So what you are telling here is, you are telling from the request, give me the incoming params and get the incoming txt username. So what is this txt username? That is what is that is the ID in the HTML page. So you have to refer the ID and refer it. So this will return you a string. So that is why you have to store this in a string variable, right? So you store it in string. So same way you can get the incoming password. So this is how you get the incoming passwords. For you to understand, you will be doing it like this. You'll be first getting the request, then getting the password, and then you will store it in a string variable. So this txt password is the ID of the password box in the HTML page. So this is how you access incoming parameters or incoming data from a ASP page. Now once you get access to this incoming data, right? So you will have to now check whether, so this is a validation. So validation means you have to check whether there is a username, whether is it empty. If it's empty, you have to inform the user telling the username cannot be empty or the password cannot be empty. So that is what I'm going to check now. That is what we are going to check now. So what you do is you put if condition and you take this username and you check the length property. Username.length, you type it, and then if it's equal to 0, that means the username length is 0, which means it's an empty username. So when you got an empty username, you have to inform the user telling that the username cannot be empty. So how do you inform the user is you have to use the response channel or the response and give a response to the user client telling the username cannot be empty. So for that you have to use again another built-in object, which is the response object, and in the response object there is a method called write. So you can say response dot write. So when you type, you will just type like the response dot, you can see it's a method, and what you are writing is output to the client. Now the client is running a web page on a web browser. So what you output here is HTML. So what you can say to the client is something like username cannot be empty. So when you say response.write, you are writing a response to the client and you are telling the username cannot be empty. So we can see whether this is working now by running this. So I'm going to run this code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run the login page, right? So let's run the login page. Let's click the run button. And so if it's empty, right? If you use empty and click the login button, now it should connect to the login validation ASP page, right? And I was expecting it. It to give me an error, but it didn't work. So let's check why it is. I'm going to go back and refresh the page, right? It's a login page. I'm going to refresh the page, right? And then I'm going to click the login button once. So now you can see it's working, because earlier it took from the browser cache, because I was running it earlier. So if it happens, if it doesn't work the way you want, most probably it's taking the previous version from the browser cache. So you have to refresh the page so it will work. So now you can see it says username cannot be empty. But if I put the username, it will not give me that message. As you can see, it's empty still, but it's not giving that message, right? So now I can improve this with, let's say, some color. So I can put it as a paragraph and I can say, okay, give me a font color and a font size. So let me update this. So let's go to the login validation page and I can just decorate this a bit, right? I can say, okay, put it in a paragraph and let's say give it in red color or something like that, right? So I'm going to update this line now just to put this inside. Let's say I'm going to write this code. Okay, so what I'm telling is put it in a paragraph and give it to me in red color font, right? If you want, you can also give a heading size, like somewhat larger size if you want, right? You can say, okay, H2 heading size 2, right? Okay, H2, so it comes with somewhat larger font size. So now if I run this, run the login page. Once again, click the run button, and if I put an empty username and click the login, it should give me, see, it's working. Username cannot be empty. But as I said, if I put a username and run, it's not giving that message. So that's all good. Now, okay, now if let's say if the username is empty, right, basically what I want to do is I want to inform the user to go and enter the username, right? So for that, what I can do is I can give another response to the user telling, okay, I can say the username cannot be empty, and then I can say login back. So login back is the text, and what I'm doing is I'm putting it inside a hyperlink, right? So anchor tag. So you login back, then I make it a hyperlink anchor tag, and then I'm letting the user to go to the login.html by clicking on this hyperlink. So if you run this now, it will work and it will give a hyperlink to the user. So if I just click login, so it should tell me username can be empty and login back. So when I click on the hyperlink, it will take me back to the login page. Same thing should be done for the password, right? So let's do the same thing for the password. Basically, I had to do the same similar validation for the password. So what I'm telling here now is, again, same, check the password length. If it's 0, put the message and login back. So now it will work for both username and the password. Now, if there is no problem, right? So if there's no problem, what I want to do is now, because if I run this, it will work. Let's say if I give an empty username or empty password, it will work. So if I just put the username and run, it will tell me password is empty. So it'll say password cannot be empty and login back. So it's working, right? But what if both username and password is inserted and click the login button? So now there's no problem. So it's not giving a message. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to go to the welcome page, right? I want to go to the welcome page. So let's see how to do it now. So technically speaking, we call this situation as a redirect. So I will write the command first and then explain this to you. So if there is no problem, what I'm telling now is redirect to the welcome page. So what this means is, if there is no problem, take the user to the welcome page. So redirect is a built-in object. As I said earlier, it's a built-in object. If you look here, response is the built-in object. Inside response, there's a method called redirect. So redirect is a method inside the response object. It's a command. So what you are telling is send the user to the welcome page. So what you give here is, what I have given here is I am telling send the user to the welcome page, right? Send the user to the welcome page. Let me check this. So what I'm telling here is send the user to the welcome page. So if you are confused with this, you can simply start like this. So if I just comment this line and then explain this to you. So how this line is gradually, if you want to know how to build this line gradually, what you do is you will just say welcome. Okay. So what this does is, I just commented that line, it will just send the user to the welcome page, right? So this is known as redirections. So now if you run this, you will see that if for an invalid username or for a password, it gives a message. Let's say if it's password, invalid means if it's empty. So whether it's valid or invalid, we will be checking on another lesson where we connect to the database. So password cannot be empty. Login back. So if I enter both the valid username and the password, now there's no error. So when I click login, it goes to the else and it redirects. So when it redirects, this is what happens. It will take you to that redirected page, which is the welcome page. Because in your code, what we said is, if there's a problem, give a message. else, if there's no problem, redirect and take the user to the welcome page. So now you know how to redirect a user to a particular page. Now let's see what was this extra thing which was here, right? So this extra thing is known as URL query parameters, which means when I'm going to the welcome page, I can tell the welcome page that I'm sending the welcome page a parameter. So this is the parameter name and this is the value. Parameter name can be anything, it can be X. But to be meaningful, I'm telling what I'm sending. So what I'm sending is a username. So what I'm doing is when I'm redirecting to the welcome page, I'm also sending the username to the welcome page. So whatever the logged in user name. So why I'm doing this is because then from the welcome page I can tell welcome and I can put the username welcome admin or welcome John, welcome, I can do it in the welcome page by accessing this incoming username. So now let's see how to add that part to the welcome page. So now we can design our welcome page, right? So when you go to the welcome ASP page, this is a source code, right? It says welcome to ABC home page, right? And you can see my mouse over here, it says source and it says design. So you can change from the source code into the design when you are in ASP page. When you click source, look at my mouse, when you click source, it will show you the source code. When you click design, you can visually design it or visually look at it without looking at the source code, right? Source and the design. So now I'm going to design this. So while in the design page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, this is the design page, not the source code, keep that in mind. So I can enter and I can go to the toolbox from the left hand side. Then let's say, okay, let's say if I just say hi, I want to say hi and then I want to dynamically say hi John or hi admin, whatever the username. So to display that thing, I have to put a label. So I'm going to the toolbox from here and I'm putting a label. So when I double click, it adds a label over here. Then for a label, I can give a ID and I can refer that, right? So now I'm going to give the ID to the label. So in the property palette, if I scroll down, you can see there's an ID. So over here, I'm going to give ID like anything. I can give anything, but LBL, let's say user name. So now I know the label ID is LBL username. So I can refer this. So where can I refer this is in your ASP page, right? In your ASP page. So if you expand this, you can see the C# code over here. So this is your ASP page. Look at my mouse and then below it you can see the ASP C# code. So if I double click on this, I will be getting the relevant C# class, corresponding C# class. So we will be talking about these classes and all this in detail, more detail in the future lessons, but I will straight away do this for you so that you can get the idea. So what you do is the same thing. So you can access the built-in request object. So what you simply say is you will say request dot query string. This is a request. Then you got a property called query string. In that there's a method called get. So these are all built-in methods. This is a built-in object. This is a built-in property. So it's in the request. So then what you send from the login validation is the username query parameter. So that is why over here you are telling get the query string means the data coming, get the username. And then what you do is you can store it in a string variable. And then the advantage is now you can refer that label. You all remember I gave the name as LBL username. So you can say LBL username dot text property. So to that label, you can say display this as username value. So what is this page load and all? We'll be talking in the coming lessons, upcoming lessons. But let's run this and see whether this works so that you get the overall idea. So let's say if I log in as ABC, right? and if I put a password and if I click login, it should redirect to the welcome page and it says hi ABC. As you can see, it's working, hi ABC, right? So if the font size is not enough, we can improve the font size. But before that, if I go back and if I log in as admin, let's say, just giving you an example, if I log in as admin, it should say hi admin. So hi admin. So this is how you dynamically do things. And if the font size is not enough, let's just slightly increase the font size. So you can just go to the design and just select this, and you can click here and you can select somewhat large font size, right? Okay, and then you can use some colors if you want. Let's say you can select this, then you can click on these colors, etc. And let's say you put something like this and click OK. So then it's going to give the background color. If you don't want the background color, I will undo this. You can give foreground color. So click on this and click OK. So it gives. So now it works. So now it will come in a decent size label. And how you did this is very quickly you redirect and you pass a query parameter, and then from the redirected page you put the label as you drag and drop the label from the toolbox and you give ID for that, and then from the corresponding C# file inside the page load method you access the incoming data, because your login method is sending the username data to the welcome page. So the welcome page can get it using the request object and put it and then display it in the variable. So we'll be in future lessons we'll talk more about what is this class, etc. Right? So overall, let's see, we covered what is what we are supposed to cover for this lesson. So overall, if you have an empty username and a password, it does the input validation. So if you put the proper, let's say if you put some data, the validation becomes successful and then it redirects to the welcome page. And while redirecting, it also displays the username. So now, so this is the conclusion, and we did this using embedded code blocks. Now the question is this the most suitable way of doing it? The answer is no, we have to improve this, which we will be improving in next part 2 and part 3, and then you will see we'll be using validation controllers to do this in a much better way. So we are very excited to see you in those upcoming lessons, and see you all in the next lesson.